Hi everyone, it's Rabbi Dr. Jack Cohen. Hope everyone is doing well. I am now going to ponder some responses to the question that I asked at the beginning of this week. If you recall, I asked the question in this week's Parshat. It says, Moshe Rabbeinu is reviewing some of the historical events that took place, and he's telling the Jewish nation as they're about to enter into a second covenant right prior to his death. You know that we lived in the land of Mitzrayim, and the nations that we had passed through in the 40 years of our journey in the Midbar, and you saw their abominations, the shekutzehem, vegulehem, and these disgusting things that they worship, avodah zarah. And the question I had asked is, why was it so important for Moshe Rabbeinu to go out of his way to dramatize the evils of avodah zarah, given that the Jewish nation had lived within a nation of Eretz Mitzrayim, which was steeped on avodah zarah? They saw how disgusting and how despicable it was. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to go out of his way to illustrate in such a dramatic fashion, to really, publicize to them, stay away? So perhaps I can answer the question by telling you an event that took place a few years back. There was a 2-hour documentary on the evils of cocaine use. And in the documentary, they showed what happens to a person who becomes addicted to cocaine, that person is willing to sell their shirt, lose their job, abuse their wives, and give away everything in order to be able to get access to cocaine. And they did a study after they showed that documentary, and they noticed something fascinating. People who watched that 2-hour documentary were more likely to be curious and try cocaine versus others who had never heard about it. And perhaps we can illustrate the point here is that we've gone to Eretz Yisrael. Sometimes I've gone to Eretz Yisrael, and I've seen people on the street say to themselves quietly, when they see cars passing on the street on Shabbos, they say to themselves, Shabbos, Shabbos. And not very loud. So you wonder why they're saying it to themselves if no one can really hear them. And here's the answer. They're saying it to themselves in order to inoculate themselves from being desensitized to this whole concept of profaning the Shabbos. And let's go back to the question. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu dramatize his disgust for avodah zarah? You know why? Because he was warning them, listen, you lived with avodah zarah. You lived with people that did this stuff around you. It's very easy to become desensitized. Your job, your mission, Klal Yisrael, is to make sure you inoculate yourselves by protecting yourselves and making sure that you put up barriers, as our Chazal did in Pirkei Avos, as Vasus Siyag LaTorah, so that you don't become accustomed to it. What happens all too often is that we see people around us sinning and doing things that are evil, and then it has an effect on us. Moshe Rabbeinu was warning them, be careful. It's very easy to fall to this temptation and become desensitized. Perhaps I can illustrate this with a story. Many of us remember the Vietnam era, in which it was a horrible war, and there was a Jew who had been drafted by the United States, armed forces, and he went to sign up. He was given the option of 4 years in the army or 2 years in the Navy. So he just opted for the Navy because there's less time there. He reported to basic training, and from there he was assigned to a ship. Before he got on the ship, there was that first Friday. The first Friday he was introduced to the chaplain, who was a Jew, and he went to services. He brought his siddur with him, and at the end of the services, he went to shake the hand of the chaplain, as everyone else did, and the chaplain sees him holding his siddur. He says, what's that siddur? And he tells him, I brought this from home. The chaplain took the siddur and he chucked it in the garbage. He was in shock. Obviously, he wasn't an Orthodox chaplain, but he said to him, you're going to use only the prayer books that we allow for the United States Navy. There was another request that he wanted to make of him, and that was he had been told when he had signed up for the Navy that he told him he needed kosher food, and he said, no problem. When you get to your basic training facility, you'll ask them for that. And so what happened was he approached the chaplain a couple of days later, and he said to him, I'd like kosher food. The chaplain looks at him and says, you are an American first, and you're going to eat the food that we all eat, which was treif. All the Jews there were eating treif. He had brought with himself a small amount of provisions, but it was now basically all used up, and he was losing a lot of weight, given that he was now in basic training and exercising all day. He didn't know what to do, so he decided to pay a visit to the Catholic chaplain, and he told him his predicament, and he said to him, what should I do? I was told that I'll get kosher food. So the Catholic chaplain says, I can't pull rank on the Jewish chaplain. I can't authorize you should have kosher food on premises. What I could do is I can allow you to receive packages, and I'll get them and I'll give them to you. And that's what happened. He wrote his mother a letter, and she started sending him food. And she had sent him a knockwurst, like a very smelly salami. And he then kept it in his locker. And he was very careful, always telling himself, I have to keep kosher, in spite of the fact that all the Jews around me were not keeping kosher. Every once in a while, they would have these surprise inspections. in which the commanding officer would then go through the ship and he checked people's lockers. Once they had a surprise inspection, but they didn't touch his locker. A couple of weeks later, there was a surprise inspection, and it started on the other side of the locker room where his locker was located, and they checked his locker, and they opened it, and they found this very smelly salami, which was against regulations, and he said, who does this belong to? And he had no choice but to admit to it, and he goes, follow me upstairs to the deck, where it was like almost 100 degrees out there. They were in the Southeast Asia, and he made him do jumping jacks, and he made him do push-ups and sit-ups until the point where he collapsed and became unconscious. Look what happens. He ends up in the medical ward. He's flown back to the mainland, the United States, where he wakes up after a few days, and they told him what happened. He was discharged, but it turned out that the people that had gone with him, he was going to be a medic, most of them had died. There was a 99% kill rate because of the horrible consequences of Vietnam. Here we see an individual who went out of his way to inoculate himself and preserve his kashrut, and as a result, it saved his life. Most of the people that he had been training with that were in the medic unit had perished in Vietnam. So that's what we have to do. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling us, you have to inoculate yourselves because it's easy to become desensitized and slowly but surely learn from the influences around us. The second point that I raised was that in one of the psukim it says, Hanisot LaHashem Elokeinu v'niglot lanu banenu adoram. So lanu banenu has 11 dots there. And so Rashi says, because it was trying to show us that we have arevus, we have a requirement to worry about each other. We are guarantors for each other as Jews. It's important that we care about every Jew. I saw something fascinating there. A point that I had heard was that 11 dots represent the 11 curses they heard on Har Eval. And more than that, that's what Rashi tells us. But there's another point that I would like to point out, that we know that the ketoret, which is the incense, includes 11 spices. Of the 11 spices, they all smell nice. There's one that smells terrible. That's the lavona. The point I want to bring out here is that we are responsible for all Jews, those who keep the mitzvahs beautifully and the ones who smell bad, those who don't keep the mitzvahs. It's our responsibility to ensure that we, watch out for that person. We try to help them. We try to bring them along. We try to open up our homes to them. We try to open up our Shabbos tables to them. And Be'ezus Hashem, by doing that, Hashem will see that we care for every Jew, that we don't dismiss anyone. And with that, Be'ezus Hashem, we should all be around to greet Mashiach Tzidkeinu B'Ram. Amen. Thank you. And have a wonderful and Gemar Chasima Tova this coming year.